Welcome to One of One Sports. We just had another great weekend of college football, huge playoff implications, ton of great games. We're going to break it all down. It's our college football week 11 analysis and takeaways. Getting right into it, what was the biggest game of the day? You got a few options here, but I went with Georgia, Ole Miss, and Ole Miss was able to defeat Georgia 28-10. And this one, I picked Georgia to win this game, so I got it wrong. And I was really impressed with Ole Miss, starting off when that first drive of the game, when Jackson Dart throws the interception and gets injured. Georgia takes the lead. Doesn't come back into the game at first. They play the backup. I'm like, wow, it's already over. And I'm thinking, like, could this be another game like how it was last year when Ole Miss got crushed by Georgia? And then the backup quarterback comes in. I can't remember his name right now, but shout out to him for leading that touchdown drive right after coming in, getting the, not – if you get stopped there and have to punt and Georgia takes a bigger lead, momentum swings all the way to Georgia. Instead, you go down the field, get a touchdown. It's an even game. The crowd's still involved at home, and, you bring life back into them because you got to be worried. When you see your starting quarterback go down and throw an interception to start the game, that can take the life out of a stadium. But shout out to the backup for leading that drive. Then Jackson Dart comes back in and plays fairly well. There were some tough conditions, so it was hard for either quarterback to play like exceptional, but plays fairly well. He was still clearly limited the rest of the game. His ankle was taped up like a bunch, and he was hobbled. So he wasn't 100%, but was still able to play pretty well. Then a huge thing in this game, we talked about ball security, and Carson Beck struggled with it again. Now, he didn't throw 3 interceptions this time, but he did throw that interception that basically ended the game, lost a fumble early in the game, and turnovers. Well, Georgia just lost the turnover battle 3-1 after that first interception they got. And that when you lose a turnover battle like that on a road against a team as good as Ole Miss, it's always going to be tough to win. Georgia also did not establish a run game. Their leading rusher only had 47 yards. I thought, after seeing how they played against Texas on the road, I thought they'd be able to do more with that. And they couldn't establish a pass game either, really. Beck only throwing for 186, leading receiver only having 41. There were some drops that hurt Beck, and the receivers didn't step up the way you would have liked them to in a big game like this. But just holding Georgia to 10 points was just really, really impressive from Ole Miss. And the way they moved the ball with a limited Jackson Dart was also really impressive to me. Trey Harris still didn't play. So overall, really impressed by the defensive performance of Ole Miss and the offensive performance considering the circumstances. We'll talk more about what the playoff implications of this game are later because they're huge. Also, the SEC title implications of this game, also huge. Now both 2-loss teams, and now there's a huge jumbled race for the SEC title that could get really crazy. But before we do that, that'll be more towards the end of the video, just focusing in on what went wrong for Georgia. And it's just going to be turnovers, so lack of ball security, an inability to run the ball. That's really what cost them this game. And sure, you're playing a really good team on the road, but you played Texas, a really good team on the road, and responded a lot better. And this Georgia team has just not been able to consistently play to the standard of previous Georgia teams. I mean, you'd won 52 straight games against teams not named Alabama. Streak ended yesterday, and that's unfortunate to see if you're a Georgia fan. But it also means, you've been living the high life for the last few years under Kirby Smart. You always get that streak wasn't going to go on forever. At some point, someone in the SEC was going to beat you. Ole Miss was able to do it. Congratulations to them. Put themselves right back in the mix for a playoff. After that early loss to Kentucky, then the loss to LSU, there were some concerns there. But you win a big game like this, you can finish the season strong. You maybe can make the SEC title. Certainly can make the playoffs still with the 12-team format now. Huge win by them. Moving on into, some smaller scale things from the weekend. What was I right about? What was I wrong about? And we want to talk about Virginia. We called that after the bye and losing to North Carolina 41-14, Virginia was going to go on the road and beat Pitt, a top 25 team. It was a very bold prediction, and they were able to do it. They went down early, came back, won it 24-19. Not going to talk about this too long because not a huge impact on really anything, any title races, playoff races, but called this upset. Want to shout it out. In contrast, I was wrong about South Carolina. Thought Vanderbilt was going to be able to win this one. South Carolina goes on the road after a big win against Texas A&M. But no, South Carolina just wins this one convincingly. I was really impressed by it, and now they have another big game not at Missouri. I think they host Missouri this next weekend, so that's a pretty big one. But yeah, shout out to them, Lenore Sellers, Raheem Sanders, that defense completely shutting down Vanderbilt with Diego Pavia. I was impressed by it, and I was wrong about what they would do this weekend. But they're a really fun team to watch. It's been cool to see how they've improved throughout the year. Moving on from right, wrong, just going with those two for today. Who was the most surprising team from the weekend? There's really only like two options for me on this one, and I went with Georgia Tech. They were able to defeat Miami 28-23, and yeah, this one really shocked me because, one, I'm super high on Miami this year. I picked them to go undefeated. I picked Cam Ward to win the Heisman, and they were on track coming into this game, so I thought that would continue. Then, because of how Miami lost to Georgia Tech last year, not taking a knee, I thought there'd be so much focus on this game that it wouldn't be like the others. Like Miami would play their best game against a Georgia Tech team because of the fashion in which they lost last year. They did not. They came out slow, and the offense really never got going. And this is kind of the risk you run when you play Miami style with a defense that you can't really rely on. And every week, Cam Ward's got to be Superman. He's got to be a Heisman-level quarterback for you to win games. And he'd been doing that up to this point. He's a great quarterback, but some days you don't play all the way up to that level, and that can cost you. In my opinion, that's really what happened against Georgia Tech. Clearly Miami had an inability to stop the run yesterday, which was surprising because their pass defense I knew was bad, but their run defense yesterday was just atrocious. Haynes King killed them. He could barely even throw, and he killed them on the ground. And Jamal Haynes did as well. So just really bad defense on Miami, and Cam Ward didn't have a Heisman-worthy performance. And they still had a chance to win, right? You even got the ball down 28-23 with a little over a minute left. You get strip sacked, game's over. So that's unfortunate for me to see. I was rooting for Miami in this one, rooting for that prediction. But congratulations to Georgia Tech getting another huge win. You now beat Florida State this year, which obviously Florida State wasn't very good, but at the time was a big win. You beat Miami. You lost Notre Dame. But the point is, it's been a really good year for Georgia Tech considering how difficult the schedule looked coming into the year. They've been able to navigate it really well. So congratulations to them. They were the most surprising team from the weekend for me. But moving on to our most impressive team from the weekend. Maybe you guys could guess this. It is going to be Alabama, able to defeat LSU 42-13. Now about this game, I was very confident Alabama was going to win. If you've been following my predictions at all, I have not really believed in LSU at all this year. I didn't rank them top 25 in the preseason. I thought they'd lose to USC week 1. I picked against them a couple other times where I was wrong. I thought they'd beat Arkansas. I thought Arkansas would upset them, and I thought Ole Miss would beat them, and I picked against them in the Texas A&M game. I've really not liked this LSU team throughout the season. I just felt like they were sort of fraudulent this year. So I was confident Alabama was going to win this game. Didn't think they could do it like this. One, the defense seems to have improved so much over the past 3 weeks. Sure, they shut down Missouri, but I was like, okay, Drew Pine, Missouri, that's not that impressive. Then you come out of the bye week, but shut down this LSU offense, that is impressive to me because although I don't think LSU is a great team, now I do realize at this point of the year they are a top 25 caliber team, and they have a good offense. Sometimes when the run game gets going, they can have what looks like a great offense, but at least a good offense. And Alabama was able to completely shut down LSU for the most part. It's a little bit inflated because LSU had to start going for fourth downs and things, and they had the turnover deep in the red zone by Nussmeier's interception. So it's a little bit inflated, but nevertheless a really good defensive performance out of Alabama. And then Jalen Milroe almost running for 200 yards. LSU had a bye week after A&M beat them because Marcel Reed came in and ran all over. So I thought, okay, LSU's going to be super focused on not letting Jalen Milroe beating them with his legs, And considering last year he also ran for 4 touchdowns, they're going to be super focused on that. but that could open up the deep passing game. We could see Ryan Williams hit some deep ones, but no, they just still beat LSU with the QB run game. So that was impressive because I felt like LSU knew that was what Alabama was going to want to do. Had 2 weeks to prep for it. Really had like a whole year to prep for it, and Alabama just still was able to do it very effectively. So I was really impressed by that. And yeah, coming off a bye week, both times Alabama has had really impressive performances. The Georgia win, the LSU win. So now it's about what can you do after that, because, obviously last time you went on the road to Vanderbilt and then lost. So Alabama's got to finish the season strong. In theory, you should win these last 3 games. Oklahoma, Auburn, I think it's Maine. You should win all those games. But this team, you should have beaten Vanderbilt. You could have beaten Tennessee. You end up losing that. So this team, they're still not, I don't fully trust them, even though they were my preseason national title pick. They just haven't been consistent enough, but I think we clearly see, once again, when they play their best performance, they're one of the most dangerous teams in the country. And they were the team I was most impressed with this weekend. Moving on to a playoff look-in, this is what, as currently, what I would seed the playoff. This is not what I think the committee would do. Because I don't think this is what the committee would do. And this is not what I'm projecting the playoff to be at the end, because this isn't what I think it will look like. This is, if you ask me today, seed your playoff bracket, this is how I would rank it. And here's what it looks like. At number 1, I've got Oregon. Pretty sure most people agree with that. At 2, I've got BYU. Oh, and I should mention, Oregon's over Indiana because I'm just going with the higher ranked. If you're leading your conference right now, you get the conference championship, and if there's teams tied, I just go with who I would have higher ranked. So Oregon and Indiana are tied, but I have Oregon higher ranked. BYU leads the Big 12, and I think they have really good strength of schedule. Tennessee is tied for the lead in the SEC with Texas and I believe Texas A&M, but I would have Tennessee rate the highest out of all of them. And I put BYU over Tennessee because although Tennessee is the win against Alabama, the loss against Arkansas hurts them. And then BYU, you have Kansas State win. You have the SMU win, who is right now 4th here. So that's a really big win. So strength of schedule gets BYU the nod for me. And then SMU leads the ACC now, which I would put at 4. And then getting to 5, Ohio State, I would probably have ranked 2nd overall. But in this format, obviously, only the conference champions get top 4 seeds. So that's why I have Ohio State 5. Indiana still undefeated. I have it 6. And then Boise State, I moved all the way up to 7. Because I think when you look at this team, a 3-point loss to Oregon doesn't really hurt you at all. The Washington State win by 21, I think, looks better every week as Washington State keeps winning. So that's a really good win to me. UNLV win, also very solid. So a pretty decent strength of schedule with the loss that's not bad at all. And I think they've been pretty impressive in the style they play. Maybe sometimes the margins aren't the highest, like the Nevada game, but just the way they run the ball, it's effective. And I think deserving of 7 right now, narrowly over Notre Dame, who I have 8, also at 1 loss, but that Northern Illinois loss is just a brutal loss. Yes, they have the Texas A&M win. That helps. You have the Georgia Tech win, which looks better now. You have the Louisville win, which is a good win. So you have good wins. You have the Navy win, which is pretty solid. But that Northern Illinois loss is the reason I put Boise ahead of them, because that's a really bad loss. 9 is where I went with Alabama. And there's kind of this clump of SEC schools. You might have noticed Texas got left out, even though they have 1 loss. And the reason for that is Georgia going on the road and beating Texas convincingly makes me still have, even though Georgia has 2 losses, I would still rank them ahead of Texas because of the fashion in which they were able to beat them, with it being in Texas's stadium and how convincing it was. But Georgia has the same record as Alabama and Ole Miss, and both those teams have head-to-head over them. So they both, to me, get the nod over Georgia. So Alabama I ranked 9th ahead of Ole Miss because Vanderbilt lost, not as bad as Kentucky lost. Plus they have the LSU win and the Georgia win, which is better. Like Ole Miss just has the Georgia win. So Alabama gets 9. Then Ole Miss gets 10 because I'm putting them ahead of Georgia for the head-to-head. Georgia I went with at 11. And then 12, it came down to Penn State, Texas, and Miami. If you wanted to put Texas here, I get it. But when I'm looking at this, I think it'd be unreasonable to go SEC teams at 10 or 9, 10, 11, and 12 because I feel like that defeats the point of the playoff. Like it should be more diversified. And then Penn State just really has beaten nobody. Miami, at least, I think Florida and Louisville are decent wins. Louisville's a good win. Florida's a decent win. And the ACC obviously not very strong, but I don't think the Big Ten's very strong either. Loss on the road, Georgia Tech's not great. Penn State's loss to Ohio State, not a bad loss at all, obviously, but Penn State just really hasn't beaten anybody. They've also played close games against inferior opponents, and I need them to, they just haven't beaten anybody right now, and I feel like it's just because they have a Penn State logo. Like, if Boise State had their schedule and had lost to Ohio State, they would not, the committee wouldn't be respecting Penn State, or wouldn't be respecting Boise State, I should say, if that makes sense. And Penn State, just a really weak strength of schedule. Miami's not strong either, but a little stronger. Texas, in my opinion, also not strong at all. So it's any of those three teams. I'm not mad at whoever you pick. I want Miami to still get the 12 spot. But yeah, this is how today I would see the playoff. Not a projection. I don't think Tennessee is going to win the SEC. I still think Miami is going to win the ACC. I don't think who's here. Well, no, that's right now. We won't get too much into my other predictions. But yeah, just for example, I don't think Tennessee will win the SEC. But just as of today, you asked me, what do you think the playoff should be if the season ended right now? This is what I would vote for. Now we can move on to our final games that we want to look at. So Clemson was able to bounce back, beat Virginia Tech. Not the cleanest performance from them. Moved the ball decently in the first half, but couldn't put it in the end zone or really get field goals, but then played much better in the second half. Win the game, stay alive in the ACC playoff or ACC championship hunt. Indiana played a close one against Michigan. Was a little surprised to see that. But they get the win, and in the end, Michigan just, once again, unfortunately, does not have enough firepower to make plays down the stretch, win the game. Had a chance, couldn't get it done. Then Kansas was the other team I was considering for most surprising. I thought Iowa State would bounce back, but Kansas was just dominant offensively. Really concerned by what that Iowa State defense did, and potentially knocked Iowa State out of the Big 12, or potentially when we look at it, Iowa State will miss the Big 12 championship because of this loss to Kansas. So really significant in that way and really surprising. BYU, if you stayed up for this one, it got crazy. Looked like the whole game Utah was going to win. BYU makes just enough plays down the stretch, maybe a little bit of luck, some referee help there. Looked like the game was over, and they end up winning the game on not a walk-off field goal, but game-winning field goal. And then Colorado, which we're going to talk about more right now, beats Texas Tech and sets themselves up very nicely to potentially make the Big 12 championship, which is a perfect segue into our biggest takeaways from the weekend. And yeah, starting off is that Colorado is a serious playoff contender. Right now, they're second in the Big 12, control their own destiny, and there are 3 games left. You've got Utah, who's not a great team right now. They're obviously, they could lose to Utah, yes, but Utah has lost to Houston recently. Just lost to BYU in a close one. It does seem a little better. They've gotten a little better since they switched quarterback, so it's not a gimme, but definitely a winnable game. Then Kansas, also not a gimme. We just saw them take out Iowa State. They almost upset Kansas State. They're dangerous as well, but they're still one of the weaker teams in the Big 12, you would think, and Colorado would be favored. And then Oklahoma State to end the year has not won a game in Big 12 play. You should win that game. 3 very winnable games. And if they win those 3 games, they will be playing for a spot in the college football playoff. Deion Sanders, Shedeur Sanders, Travis Hunter, you win those 3 games, you will play probably BYU, but maybe it's a Kansas State, maybe it's an Arizona State actually, who got a big win. You'll be playing for a spot in the college football playoff. And I'm not sure the college football world is ready for that. But moving on to number 2, is that the Big 12 and ACC are probably only going to get in one team. I think looking at it right now, the ACC has a better chance than the Big 12 because if SMU wins out and Miami wins out, and one of them, wins it, I think there's a chance the other still gets in as an at-large. But SMU, I think, could still trip up, and Miami probably won't trip up, but you didn't think they'd lose to Georgia Tech either. SMU, easy schedule, but there's some, at Virginia, for example, people probably don't think it's dangerous, but the way Virginia just beat Pitt, I don't think you can overlook them. But so the ACC does have a pathway where both those teams win out. One of them, they play a tight game in the ACC title, and the committee puts both in. But other than that, if one of them falls, it's only going to be the conference champion who gets in. Then in the Big 12, the scenario where you get 2 in is BYU goes undefeated and then lose to the title. There's a chance you get 2 in. But if BYU wins out and wins, they're the only ones getting in. Or if BYU drops one and then loses, the committee probably won't put them in. So right now, I think it's like a little over. I would give it like 55-40. I'd say, actually, let's just say like 50-50 that these teams both get one in. Moving on to my final takeaway from the weekend, and that is that the SEC title race is going to be crazy. And Ole Miss Georgia kind of set up this doomsday scenario that if you guys just let me walk you through, it's a little complicated, a lot of teams involved, but there's a few key points. One is that Georgia next week at home beats Tennessee. They will be favored. I'm leaning towards picking them, and I think it's pretty reasonable to expect. Like, obviously, Tennessee could win. Tennessee's a very good team, but it's not crazy to think Georgia will win this game, right? Probably likely that Georgia wins that game. Then the other key thing that has to happen is Texas A&M must beat Auburn, and Texas must beat Arkansas and Kentucky, and then either one of them can win the game they play against each other, right? I think also very reasonable, Texas A&M should beat Auburn, Texas should beat Arkansas and Kentucky. Again, upsets can happen, but this is all hypothetical and just kind of what's likely to happen. So in this scenario, Georgia's a 2-loss team. One of Texas and Texas A&M is a 2-loss team, and the other is in the conference title game with 1 loss. So now we have a tie between Georgia, and let's just say Texas won the game. So Georgia and A&M are tied at 2 losses. But then we look around, and LSU has Florida, Vanderbilt, and Oklahoma. If they win all those games, they would also be tied with 2 losses. Missouri has South Carolina, Arkansas, and Mississippi State. I expect them to lose a game, but if they win all of those, they would have 2 losses. If Ole Miss beats Florida and Mississippi State, they would have 2 losses. If Alabama beats Oklahoma and Auburn, they would have 2 losses. And if Tennessee beats Vanderbilt after losing to Georgia, they would also have 2 losses. So in that scenario, Texas A&M, Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama, Ole Miss, Missouri, and LSU would have a 7-way tie for second place in the SEC. Is this what I'm expecting or predicting? No, I think Missouri probably loses. I think another team will lose. But I think it's very reasonable to expect that 4 or more teams out of those will win those games and be tied for second place. And that's going to be crazy because there's going to be a team probably left out of the playoff that if they had won like the 7th tiebreaker could have played for the conference title. It's just wild to think about. And this was really set up by Ole Miss beating Georgia. And now things are going to be crazy down the stretch in the SEC. But that's my final takeaway from the weekend. Let me know, what were your guys' biggest takeaways? Any thoughts on some of the biggest games? Leave it all in the comment section down below. As always, leave a like, subscribe. Until next time.